Alright, I'm going to continue on. I haven't been able to find the database, but I'm going to continue on as though I have. What I'd like you all to do, please, is to go over to View, and under View there's actually two ways that we can look at this. We can go through Server Explorer, which is right here, alright, or we can go in through View SQL Server Object Explorer. That's the one that I used. Alright, and that's what I'd like you to use. So click View and SQL Server Object Explorer. Yours isn't going to look anything like this because for some reason, unbeknownst to me, even after I upgraded from 2017 to 2019, since I didn't change my Server Explorer, it's got all my databases for the last 3 years. Alright, I didn't realize that, but I'm going to live with what I got. So, my question to you is, do you see something that looks similar to this? It may not look exactly like it, but does it look similar to this? Alright, I believe, now again, this is my machine name. Yours probably isn't going to say Rankin DSK01, etc. It's going to have basically the name that it's associating with your machine. Alright, but my question is, do you have some kind of a thing that looks like this that says local DB? Does everybody have that? Is there anybody who doesn't have that? You might have more than one, and that's okay. All right. I believe where this is going to be, at least where I think it's going to be in one of these two. It's not going to be in this one up here, but it's going to be local DB either /V11 or under projects V13. So if you open those up, what you'll see in there is a thing that says databases, and I'm hoping you might have to open up both of them because I'm not sure where yours will go. All right, but try one. If it does, you don't see anything, try the other one, and you might have to bring this down. But you want to look under the databases and see if you have a database in there that I think is going to be called like MovieDB Context. You know, and it's, I'm going to say this, I find it funny in a weird, in a non-funny way, but I did it this summer and boom, boom, boom. I did it in an afternoon. I did all 12 of these in one day. I had no problems with anything. So, has anybody been able to find their database? Yes. Okay, where is your database, if I can ask? This one?
No, the one above.
This one?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay. And then under databases. See, these are the databases I built over time. All right. But when I look through here, there was nothing. There's movies 2. Oh, there it is. It's there. There's nothing in that. And you go to here to movies 2. When you open this and you open up tables, what I'm hoping you're going to find, and that's what I'd like you to do then, is to open up tables and see if those 3 tables are there. All right, the actors table, the roles table, and the movies table. Yes? Now, who has absolutely no idea what I'm talking about because you don't find any of that stuff? All right, then I'll come over and take a look at yours in just a minute. What I want you to realize, though, and what I want you to look at is this. For those of you, am I right in assuming then that everybody else sees it? Yes? All right. So for those of you who do see it, what I'd like you to do is, right mouse click on any of those 3 tables. Doesn't matter which one. But right mouse click on one of them, and then you should be able to, there should be options there, all right, where, I'm going to just grab a different one. Hopefully there's something in my music store, but it probably isn't anything in there either. But what you should be able to do when you right mouse click is you should be able to either look in there at the database design or look at the records that are in there. So what you should see when you look at the design is when we went through this, the schema was built. And when we went through the earlier, when we set up those objects with that information, that puts your data in there for you. Now, you actually could go in and open up an SQL window over here, and you could run queries on that. All right? You could, whatever. You could run min-max, all the other good stuff that we've looked at before. All right? So I'm right in assuming that the 10 of you, all right, yours works. Is that correct? Because I want to go on, but I don't want to go on if people don't have that information. Like I said, I don't know what's going on with mine, but I'm going to go on anyway because I should be able to show you the rest of the stuff. Yeah, that's actually what we call, that's what it should be called. And if you right mouse click on one of the tables, you should be able to either look at the schema by doing the designer, and you should be able to look at the data by the data. Am I right in assuming you guys have worked with that stuff before? What? Okay. Open up the top one. The converse is databases. Try that. Neat. And you built successfully when you ran the program? Did you run the program? Okay, that's probably why you've got to run the program. So remind me of that. And we'll look at that later. All right. So what I'm going to be able to do and what I'm not going to be able to do, there's 3 lessons left in here. There's a lesson on CRUD, and this one in here does, I believe, add and read. All right. Then there's a section on data annotations. I'm going to show you a few things, some of which are not in this handout. And then they come back in the last lesson and they do the update and the delete. Okay? So that's really what's left in here. So the author says, if we want to be able to add information to our movie database, this is what we're going to have to do. All right? So it says, let's create an add action method, create an empty view model and pass it to the view, and in there show what we want to be able to do. If you look up on the screen here, we'll talk about all this stuff in just a minute. All right? But we want to write this so that after we put in all this code, this is what's going to come up. So in other words, if you look up here, all right, it's not movie index. We're adding a new method called add. All right? And when you bring up the add method, the idea is you'll be able to add a new movie to your database. Does that make sense? All right? Plus, there is some built-in, there is some stuff wired in here to make sure that it's okay, such as, notice that the year says 0. That's just a default value that got put in there, and that default value got put in there because we said that year was an integer field. That's why it's in there. If you run it, you put your name in there for the year, and you try to add the movie, you're going to get an error. Does that make sense to everyone? Because you'd be trying to add a string into an integer field. All right? Notice what's not there. There's a title and there's a year. There's no ID. I believe this was set up basically as an identity field. So it's automatically going to be put in there for you. You'll have an ID and it'll auto increment. All right? So that's what we want to get through in this lesson. But before we do it, let's talk about a few things that are in here because I'm not trying to skip stuff. All right? So the author says, let's write some code. So you can take this that you see right here, and literally we can go back into our movies controller. All right? And I do want to make sure that everybody here understands something, and that is, let me get that way over here, that when we take a look, under our models, we've got 2 different things in here. we've got movie.cs, and we've got movie.db context. Yeah, you can all read that. I know it. But what I want you to understand is in here, in the movie CS, this is where we, for lack of better words, created our tables, or what's going to become our tables. This right here is kind of the glue in the context, and that made sure that when we want to go and convert those classes into tables, we were able to do it. And I just want to make sure you have at least a fundamental understanding of what I'm talking about. All right? All right, so we want to go into our movie controller here, and typically you leave the index at the top. So I'm going to put the next one they tell us to put in here down below. Okay? It's a brand new method that's called add. And you can put that in. You can either type it yourselves or you can grab it from in here. All right? But I want to try to take a couple minutes and explain what's going on in there. All right? The first thing I'm going to tell you is, and it almost sounds like, what? Technically, you don't need this. All right? And I think yesterday, when I asked you the difference, what's the opposite of get, I think for some stupid reason, I said put. It's post. Get and post. All right? When you do a get, like you do right here, you're not changing data. You are showing data. So when you do an HTTP get, you will not be changing the database. You will be providing a view of the database. You might be showing a record. You might be showing all records. You might be showing just those records that meet some criteria, but you're not going to be changing the database. Now, don't type this in, but let's say I did want to do that. Then what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to be putting in an HTTP post. That's what I use to actually make changes. All right? And let me just get rid of that. Okay? And I think we moved the curly. There we go. So what this is doing, first of all, notice, just like with the index, it's returning an action result. All right? The name here is add. Do you understand? I'm asking you this. Do you understand that what this is doing right here, all right, is that is going out and it is going to be calling, all right, it's going to go out to the models movie.cs file, and it's going to be calling this. It's basically going to be creating a movie for us. That's what we're telling it to do. Does that make sense? All right. Because a lot of the stuff that happens here, many books, including the book we're using for this class, don't do a fantastic job of explaining what's happening. The author of the book we have, Adam Freeman, does a great job of talking about unit testing, about talking about different software packages, most of which we're not even going to use in here. But what's really happening here, sometimes he just kind of glosses by it. So the idea is when we put this in, eventually we're going to be able to bring up, this is just going to bring up the screen. All right? So let's keep going on. As it says, what is the get? Get and post are the two things that you can put in here. And I should have mentioned this. If we wanted to, notice how there's just a comment here that says get. Remember that? That we got that for free, so to speak. We could have typed in here. We could have come in and typed in, oops, right there. We could have put in HTTP get. We could have done that. All right? But it sounds stupid, but you get by default. So if you don't put get or post in here, it automatically is as though we put that in. So a natural question would be, well, then why did he do it here? I think to show you that you can put it in if you want to. I don't know. All right. Okay. So he talks here about get and post. Okay? As it says, there are more things. There is a put, there's a delete, there's a few other things that aren't even listed in here. Okay? So, you know this already because we've talked about stuff like this already. I'm trying to show you something. Here we go. All right. Hopefully, this is a course that I'm taking a look at that I did purchase because I got it in a deal. Next semester, when we go through the Android stuff, in the last week or two of the class, I want to teach you another way to write Android. All right. So that's why I'm looking at that. What I'm telling you though is this. Do you remember what that's called? No, it's not a URL. What's that part of it called? Anybody? What? Oh, let's try. It's a query string. That says, I'm using a coupon code here, and the coupon code I'm using is back to school. All right, it's telling me that this is part of a campaign that's got a name and the promo and some other stuff. The point is, when you see a URL that's like this, that has a query string with a question mark, etc., that means it's passing the data in clear text. In other words, you can see it right on your screen. That's a get. Sometimes you will do operations and you won't see that stuff, but something's happening behind the scenes. That's a post. The difference is with a get, it puts that information right up here in the query string. All right. With a post, it hides that information in the HTTP header. Why would you want to do that? Because when it does a post, that's typically when you are putting in password information, credit card information, etc. When you put in password or credit card information, there's two ways you can do it. You can actually pass it up here. You go, my God, how would you pass it up there? You'd be showing stuff. No. Then what you have to do is encrypt it first. All right? You can do it that way, and that's usually too much work. So usually what most software does by default is it takes sensitive data and it encrypts it by putting it inside of the HTTP header. What the heck is an HTTP header? When you are at your browser and you're typing in and you hit enter, you're sending an HTTP request. We talked about that in lesson 1. One of the things that's in the HTTP request is an HTTP header which has additional information in it. All right? Okay. I don't know if that helped or hurt, but at least you've heard it. How's that? So in here, right here, they come in and they talk about get. As it says, get is the method used for getting the resource from the server. In other words, again, couple things. Does not alter the data. I already mentioned that to you. That's the big thing. So if you remember, all right, if you remember the way that I did it, at least, when we talked databases, if you remember, we talked about select, we talked about update, we talked about insert, and we talked about delete. These three all change the data. All three of those are going to be done using post methods. This one does not change the data. This one will be done using a get method. And if that makes sense to you, that's good. All right? So as it says, the data is passed as parameters in the request URL like I just showed you. For that reason, it should never be used for sensitive data. All right? And that's what they're showing right here. Okay? The difference is, and again, you can read through this stuff, but it's probably better worded than what I just gave you out loud, but it's the same information. All right? The good news about gets, you can bookmark them. You cannot bookmark a post. All right? And one of the reasons you can't bookmark it is because it may have sensitive data in it. All right? So we've got that, and then they talk about post. Again, it does allow you to alter the state. The data is passed in the body of the request in that header, and it's safer. All right? So that's typically, again, and done by people who know a lot more about this kind of stuff than I do. But that's where you get your credit card and your password and your other kind of sensitive information. All right. So what's typically going to happen, you're going to see this when we start building bigger projects, is you're going to have quite often a get and a post. When you call the get method, it'll bring up a form that'll allow you to insert a new record or delete an existing record or whatever. But there'll be a button on there that'll say like delete or insert or whatever. When you click that button, that's going to call the code that's in the post. So the get will bring the stuff up, but when you actually want to act on it, it'll call the post. All right? And again, that's what they explain in here. So it says when the user enters the movie information in the form, okay, it says we can get the entered values of this through the movie model instance. So they're trying to show you what's going on in here. It's kind of what I tried to mention to you, that when you do the get, it's going to bring up an empty form or an empty something. When you act upon that, you'll be doing the post. All right? Like I said, I hope that makes at least a little bit of sense. And it says that's a simplified version, but basically that is what's happening. All right? Okay. Now, the next thing that's in here, if you haven't liked it so far, you'll probably like this even less. All right? And what I mean is that ASP.NET decided that some of the stuff that was done for you by web forms was not, well, I'll say dumb, but dumb isn't the right word. All right? So what they did was they took things like this. You should be able to look at that and know what that is. All right? It's a text box, right? It has no value, so there's nothing in it. Its name is title. Its ID is title. All right? When we worked, if you remember, when we worked on JavaScript, we did things like get element by ID. That's this. But when you work on the server side, you don't typically, unless you're working with JavaScript or jQuery, you don't use the ID, you use the name. Okay? And typically, almost always, the name and the ID will be the same. All right. This is just adding a bootstrap class to it called form control. All right? But it says below HTML snippet would create an input element for us. Okay? It says instead of us writing it by hand, we can use, and this is something that's fairly new, that are called HTML helpers. All right? And they're designed to work with this stuff. Look at the difference. When you type in @ big H little TML dot, the system, the IntelliSense is going to kick in and say, well, what do you want to do? All right, notice what this says. It says text box 4. Do you remember back in the day when we were doing the AWD1111 course that when you would create labels, you would have 4 equals? Anybody remember that? That's what this is. But instead of us writing it as straight HTML, we now write it as an HTML helper method. And if you raise your hand and go, okay, I even get that, why? Because that's the way they do it. I mean, I can't give you, sometimes I don't know what the answers are because the people who created this thought this was a better and more powerful way and a better way performance-wise than the way it was being done. If that sounds like BS, that's still the best answer I can give you. All right, so they say here, you might think there's not much difference between these, but there are advantages for using helpers. So these are the main reasons. Okay? First one, model binding. It says in the above HTML helper, we're using a Lambda expression. You probably, unless you've worked with Lambdas, and again, like Grace, I don't know if Evan went through Lambda expressions with you. He may have, he may not have, or it might have been something real quick in passing. All right? But we're going to learn how to write these. You are going to write these. All right? Basically, what the lambda expression says is this is called the lambda operator. It's an equal sign followed by a greater than sign. Okay? What happens virtually is you take what's to the right of that sign, and that's executable code. You execute it, and you put the result into what's on the left-hand side. All right? In a nutshell, that's what happens when you use a lambda. Is there more to it than it? Of course there is. All right? But really, I'm just trying to give it to you in a sentence or two as far as what's happening. So as it says, here we use the lambda expression, which says what the element is used for. It's going to automatically generate the ID and the name attributes for you. So there's less typing. We don't have to say ID equals, etc. All right? Second, compile time safety. If you screw something up this way, I don't know if you've ever done this, because I've done it hundreds of times. I've made a mistake in my HTML in something like this, where I put a wrong name, I don't know, like here or whatever. It'll still run. It just doesn't work. And my guess is we've all done that at some time or another. You put in some HTML code where you put an error in there, but the system doesn't show it as an error. It just doesn't show anything. Well, here, if you're trying to do this, they changed it. It's supposed to be title. They put title 2 in there. And what they're showing you is the IntelliSense will kick in, and it'll say, that's an error. It won't let you. You'll know because that red squiggly will mean that if you try to run this, you're going to get a compile time error. All right, so that's the second thing. Third, it says in the above HTML helper, we are passing HTML attributes to HTML helpers so that it'll make use of them. Okay? As class is a reserved word, we're using @class. Prepending it with the @ sign rather. We know what that @ sign does. It says makes it a valid identifier. It says you just learned a C# tip when using HTML helpers. It's another advantage. It results in less and cleaner code. So my guess is whoever created this said there's got to be a better way of doing it than just having people put in that actual HTML. It's too error prone. It's to a lot of things. So they changed it around so you do it like this. All right? So it says below is the complete code for the add view. All right? It says you can see that I've used a few HTML helpers such as the label for and also this, which will, as it says, start a form, begin a form. All right? It says we have used the using keyword and code block, that's in here, to show that all this stuff belongs together. All right? So this is the add view. So if you have not, I don't remember if we created it or not, probably not. You right mouse click on add a view. It's called add. It can be empty. It should use the layout page. You click add. It's going to come in here and show you this momentarily. There it is. We don't need any of that stuff. Instead, we're going to go in here and we're going to grab everything that's in here, copy it to the clipboard, come back in here, remove what is there, and paste that in. All right? So I'll let you do that, and then let's go back and talk about what's happening in these lines of code. All right? I had title 2 as being an error. You may or may not have that. When I changed it to title, looks like it worked fine. And again, other than Grace, most of you have heard most of my stories, and I get that. But kind of what we're doing here is if I'm teaching you to swim, we're not starting in the kiddie pool. We're not even starting in the shallow end. We're going about the same size that you are, and I'm pushing you in. So I don't expect all of this to totally make sense right now. And if it doesn't, that's okay. But I decided to do it this way so you can see some of the work you have to go through to make things work. All right? Like I said, we're going to go through chapter 2 next. That'll help a little bit. My hope is by the time we get to chapter 7 and we start actually writing the sports store app, that you're going to be like, oh, I remember when we kind of did this. All right, and you'll see some parallels between them. But you'll have done a bunch of other stuff before that. All right, so let's look. Again, this is basically saying that we're in a view, but we have to use this information from the models. So this is telling it that the model that we're using, project name, .models, .movie. And if you remember, if you go in there and you look at that, all right, that's got all the classes in there. This is the title. I haven't mentioned it yet. I'll say it now. There's other ways of doing it. What ViewBag is it's more or less, you can actually look at it. Most books explain it this way. It's a bag where you can throw anything in the world in it you want to. And you can use it throughout your program then. All right, so all we're doing is we're saying, hey, in this ViewBag, put the title in here and call it add. That's it. All right. Then most of the work is being done here inside of this form. So we're telling it to insert a form. All right. It's in our add routine. It's going to be referencing movie. Notice when you look in here, it's going to be doing a post. So in other words, it's going to allow us to make changes to the underlying data. All right. Okay. Then we've got in here just something that says add movie. So this line you see here in blue is ideally, if this works, at least works for you, that's this line right there. Does that make sense? All right. Then we've got the rest of the stuff. Our label that's going to say title. That's this. All right. And our label, let's see, what else do we have? This is our text box. And that's going to be the text box that's going to hold the title. Then we've got our label for the year, and this is our text box that's going to hold the year. Finally, when you look in here, what else do we have? Well, we're going to have a button that's going to say add movie. What is it? It's a submit button. So in other words, you click that submit button, that's going to cause the post method to run. In other words, it's going to attempt to go in and put that record into your database. All right? I'm hoping that makes at least some sense to you. So the author says we have used the code below as the first line in the view. That's this. We already talked a little bit about that. He talks about it again, I think. There you go. It says we are telling the view that the model that we're using is a model of type movie. That's what's going to be passed in. We need the information from the movie class in order to be able to do what we're about to do. Okay? Then we can use that movie model in our HTML helpers, as has been done. Why don't you do a file save? Mine's still not going to work. But my hope is when you do a file save, now, if you've already run it, not a problem. If you have not run it yet, what you may want to do, you're going to do one of two things. If you just do a run, it brings up index, correct? You're going to have to then manually go in, and when you have your port number, your port number here, followed by /movies/index, you're either going to have to manually go in and remove that and put in the word add, or you come down here to your add method. All right, so under your methods, you come down here in your, where am I? Oh, got the wrong thing up. Let's see. In your views, you're going to have to find add, and if you right mouse click on it and choose view in browser, it should bring it up right away. All right, so try one of those, please, or the other. Do a file save all and either run it and manually go in and change the movies from index to add, or right mouse click on your add.cs HTML file and choose view in browser and see if, all right, again, ideally it's going to work for you, all right, this, okay, and again, as they mentioned, you get a 0 there in the year input element because that's the default. The default for a string is the empty string. That's why this is empty. The default for an integer is 0. All right? If it does come up, try putting in a movie. Put in a title, put in a year. As I mentioned to you right now, the only thing that's in here is this must be an integer. Does that make sense to everybody? I could put in there for the year, I could put in negative 123 and it would take it. So what we're going to do in the next lesson is we're going to add data annotations, which are going to say the year has to be within this certain range. All right? That the title can maybe be 2 to 200 characters or whatever it is. Did it work? Yes? Good. What I will do is, it's in here someplace. I've got my working copy. And what I'll do is I'll take my working copy, and once we get GitHub Classroom up and working, I'll put it up there. All right, so if you want it, if you had any problems with yours, hopefully that'll help. Now, they want you to do a couple more things in here. If you look on the screen, please. Do you see this line right here that says action link? When you run it, it says application name. All right? They want you to go in there and change it so it says open your file, views, shared _ layout. Please open that file. All right? And if you say I don't know what you're talking about, it's the one we worked with yesterday. We're going to go in and we're going to open up under views, shared, open up this layout file right there. Scroll down a bit and change application name. On mine it's line 20, on yours it could be something else. But they want you to change that line, and where it says application name, they want you to change that to micro IMDb v2. All right, so change that to this. All that's going to do is when you run it at the top, rather than saying application name, it's going to have the name of the program. That's all. All right. Okay, it says display the text. It said, yeah, we just did that. Controller name. We don't have a home controller in our application. It says even in routing, we have a default home controller to movie controller. Let's change that here as well. All right? Okay. They don't tell you to create it yet, so we will. It says we don't have a home controller. That's fine. Technically, our movie controller is our home controller. So we fixed this. If you run it again, this is what you should see. And hopefully, that makes sense to everybody, just showing it to you there. All right, it says it looks good now. Well, that's a matter of opinion. So the author says, applications would be useless if you couldn't save data. All right? So it says, let's save the information back into the database by doing the post. So you grab that information that you've got right there, copy it to the clipboard, go back here, go back to your movie controller, and right under the add, you put it there. And there's a couple things I want to say about this that, believe it or not, are actually pretty doggone important. I made this smaller so you can see both of them on the screen at once. All right? So I put the post right under the get. Does everybody notice? Look on the screen, please. Does everybody notice this one and this one? This one has no parameters. This one has a parameter. Everybody see that? If we didn't put a parameter into the other one, we'd get an error message. Remember we talked last year about overloading and overriding? It's what we're doing here. We're overloading. We've got two public action result add. Those two are identical up till right here. Those two are identical. But this one expects no parameters. This one expects a parameter. So what's the difference? This one is designed to show us that form. This one is designed to take that form that we have with information in it and throw it in or add it as a database record. All right? The key line in here, you may or may not have already figured it out, is this one. Does it make sense to everyone? Look on the screen, please. That line, line 35 here, that's saving it to the database. All right? This says when you're done, return back to the index page. All right? And notice what it says, redirect to action. It doesn't have to go to the index page. You can have it go wherever you want it to go. But the reason I'm telling you this is imagine this is a working website and we got hundreds of movies or whatever in it. When the person adds a movie, you've got control over where you want them to go next. All right? This is what gets returned right here, and that gets returned, all right, from our view. Okay? All right. That, I think, says in the above action, we are saving the model values we got to the submitted form. A few things worth noting. We are not getting each element value, rather. All right. Number two, with respect to saving the data in the database, we're not writing any insert query. Could we? Yeah. And there's other ways that this could be done. All right. You're going to learn one way when we go through the sports store project, and you're going to learn, I have my own little take on what we're going to do in the other project that we're going to be working on. All right. Number three, again, this is what I just mentioned. We are calling the redirect to action method after saving this, the changes. So the idea is, as it says here, what we want to do is show a list of movies. Going back to the index page, as you add movies, all right, that's what it should be showing you. So it's a way of verifying that your insert worked. And like I said, I hope that makes sense. All right. The author says, voila, we have saved a great movie in the database and got the information back. We have not changed anything in the existing view. It just loops through the movies and prints it out. Below is the index code for your convenience. So that's what it should look like. All right. If you did it this way, if you haven't done it this way, you can put this in. But notice the only thing they're showing in here are the movie names. They're not showing the year or anything else. That's the way this author set this up. Again, if you said why, I'd just tell you because that's the way the author set this up. All right. It says, what if the user does not type the correct data into the form? All right. It says, what would happen? For example, if the user only types only the title and forgets about the year and clicks it, what will happen? What do you think will happen when you click that? The year will be 0. 0 is a valid integer. As I mentioned to you earlier, you could put a negative number in there. As long as it was a negative whole number, all right? I don't want to break anybody's heart, but you could put 3120 in there. And the chance of anybody in this room being alive then is not very good. But you could put it in there because right now we're not doing anything
that's checking the validity of the data other than that the data is in the right data type. That's it. So in the next chapter, all right, that's going to be on validation. And I'm going to show you, we're going to go through the way they do it, but I'm going to show you just a couple other things that you could do. All right? And I don't know about you, but I think it's time for a break. So it is 2:22. Let's come back, please. Let's make it 2:35.